Welcome to the deep dive. There's this idea out there, pretty common actually, that collecting data is the really hard part of research. We spend all this time, weeks, maybe months, gathering info, and we feel like, okay, we've climbed the mountain. But honestly, that's just setting up camp. The real challenge, and where the exciting discoveries happen, is making sense of it all, turning those raw facts into, well, actual understanding. So today we're doing a deep dive into data analysis basics for thesis writing, choosing the right methods. We're using insights from a really great guide by Saurav Pen Content Digital, and our mission is pretty straightforward: to give you, our listener, a kind of beginner-friendly map for picking the best data analysis methods for your own work, maybe your thesis. The aim is really to help you validate your research, draw some solid conclusions, and, contribute something meaningful.
It really is fascinating. The guy jumps right in saying, look, without good analysis, your data, it's just stuff, raw material. It's the analysis that turns it into knowledge, something you can actually use.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into that. Before you even start thinking about, say, numbers or themes, the guide says you have to understand the nature of your research first. That sounds like step one. Foundational. What does that actually involve?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. The guide's first big point is identify your research type. Is it quantitative, focused on numbers, stats, counting things? Or is it qualitative, where you're looking deeper, interviews, opinions, experiences, the why behind things? Or maybe it's mixed methods, where you're actually combining both to get a fuller picture. Your research design, that choice, it fundamentally shapes your whole analysis strategy. You can't really skip it. It's like picking the right map before starting a journey.
That makes total sense. So for you listening right now, really nailing this initial classification, it's basically the compass for everything else you do analysis-wise. It guides every choice from here on out. Okay, right. So we've figured out our research type. Now, for those of you who might be looking at spreadsheets full of numbers, let's unpack those quantitative methods. This resource highlights some key ones. What are the main players here?
Yeah, when you've got numbers, these are your main tools. First up, descriptive statistics. Think of this as just summarizing your data quickly, getting the basics. Like if you surveyed people, what's the average age? What percentage agreed with something? It gives you that instant snapshot. Then you've got inferential statistics. This is where you go a step further. You're not just describing your data, you're trying to draw conclusions about a much bigger group. So if you test, say, a new teaching method on one class, inferential stats help you figure out if it would likely work for all similar classes. It's used for hypothesis testing, comparing groups, t-test, ANOVA, things like that. We also see regression analysis. Now, this is really useful when you want to predict something or understand how much one thing impacts another. Like, can you predict exam scores based on study hours? Regression helps quantify that relationship. And closely related is correlation analysis. That just shows you how variables are linked. Do they move together? Oppositely, how strong is that link?
And for doing all this number crunching, what are the typical tools people use for quantitative work?
Well, the standard ones are pretty well known. SPSS is a big one, very powerful. Excel is great for basics and data handling. Then you have R and Python, which are coding languages offering huge flexibility for complex stuff. And there's also JASP, which is becoming popular as a more user-friendly open source option.
Okay, so that covers the number side pretty well. But what if your research isn't about grounding things? What if it's about understanding, I don't know, human experiences, stories, opinions, the why? That's where qualitative methods come in, right?
Yeah. Exactly. These methods are really designed for uncovering that rich, nuanced stuff that numbers just can't capture. The guide mentions thematic analysis. This is probably the most common. It's all about finding patterns, recurring ideas, or themes in your data. Imagine reading through lots of interview transcripts and noticing people keep talking about the same feeling or challenge. That's thematic analysis in action. Then there's content analysis. This is a bit more systematic. Say you have hundreds of open-ended survey answers. You'd code them, assign labels to specific words or ideas like poor communication or good support. Then you categorize these codes to see what comes up most often or how different ideas relate. Narrative analysis focuses specifically on stories, how people make sense of their lives through narrative. And finally, grounded theory. This one's interesting. It's about building theory directly from the data. You don't start with a theory, you let it emerge, like being a detective, really. You gather clues, spot patterns, and build the theory based only on what you find.
And for managing all this text, these stories, are there specific software tools?
Oh, definitely. For qualitative data, you often rely on tools like NVivo, ATLS.TI, or MXQDA. They really help manage and organize huge amounts of text or even multimedia data. Makes coding and finding themes much, much easier.
Which brings us to a really interesting point. What if your research kind of needs both? You need the numbers and the stories.
Ah, yes. That's exactly where the mixed methods approach comes in. It's about intentionally combining both quantitative and qualitative methods. Why? To get richer, more complete insights. I actually worked on a project once looking at patient satisfaction. The surveys, the quantitative part, told us how many were satisfied. Okay, useful. But it was the qualitative interviews that told us why some weren't satisfied. Things like staff interaction, waiting room comfort,
Right.
stuff numbers don't easily show. The numbers gave the what, the stories gave the why, made our recommendations much stronger. So connecting it to the bigger picture is just about getting the most complete understanding possible. The key thing, though, if you use this approach, is having clear analysis plans for both data types. You can't just mush them together.
That's a fantastic example. Really shows how they work together. Now, there's a piece of practical advice in the guide that feels particularly relevant, especially for students who might feel a bit overwhelmed. It says basically, don't make it harder than it needs to be. Pick tools you can actually handle. Which raises a good question. Is it always best to stick with what you know, or is it sometimes worth pushing yourself to learn a more powerful, maybe more complex tool?
That's a really practical point. And often, simpler is better, especially under pressure, like with a thesis deadline. It prompts that question, doesn't it? Are you setting yourself up for success or just unnecessary struggle? The guide suggests looking at beginner-friendly options first, or, importantly, taking the time to learn the basics of whatever software you choose before you're knee-deep in analysis. Don't hesitate to look for training, online tutorials, whatever helps. It's an investment, sure, but you also need to be realistic about your current skills and the time you actually have. Sometimes mastering a simpler tool is way better than struggling with a complex one you can't quite manage.
So, pulling all this together, what's the big takeaway for you, the researcher, starting out on a project? The guide ends with a really profound thought that connects all these different methods.
Yeah, it brings it back to the core idea. Data analysis isn't just about running tests or coding text. Fundamentally, it's about telling the story hidden in your data. You've done the hard work of collecting it. Now you need to let it speak clearly. The final advice is really clear. Choose methods that genuinely align with your research question. That's number one. Be transparent about your process. Document everything. And critically, make sure your findings are valid and reliable. It's not just about finding an answer, but finding one you can trust. The mantra they suggest is simple but powerful. Analyze wisely, interpret honestly, present confidently.
And that really sums it up perfectly. Understanding your options and picking the right data analysis method. That's the crucial step. It transforms raw info into something valuable, something actionable. It's really the difference between just having a pile of facts and actually presenting a compelling story, a real contribution. So as you think about your own research, maybe take a moment. What story is your data waiting to tell? And which of these methods we've talked about today will help you bring that story to light and make your unique contribution?